and my parents never felt safe letting me out there. So I spent a lot of my time on our balcony reading, or my favorite pastime would be playing concert. um, but yeah, also toward the end of our tenure there, there became kind of, it's a big word calling it a Hebrew school, but it was kind of like a Jewish club kind of thing that was kind of underground in this old decrepit house, and they gave English lessons. They gave Hebrew and English lessons for families who were planning to immigrate. So like on Sundays I would go there, and like I had some friendships there.
Welcome to the Immigrant Experience in America, an immigrant human library, where we amplify and humanize the experiences of immigrants in the United States and around the world. Listen in as we add another story to our immigrant human library. Hello, listeners, and thanks for joining us on another episode of the Immigrant Experience in America, where we're happy to amplify and humanize the experiences of immigrants living in the United States and around the world. Today, we have another amazing story for you. We have Marina from Belarus. Welcome, Marina.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Can you go ahead and tell us a bit about yourself? And we'd love to hear more about you.
Sure. Well, like you said, I was born in the former Soviet Union, and I came here from what today is Belarus. In 1994, I was 11, and within a few months of arrival, I turned 12. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Um, I've My first year in America was a very formative one. Between it being a very formative age and having such a big change in my life. So I've always kind of been sitting on this story of mine for a while, and finally I've had enough courage, enough guts to write it. Um, Being an immigrant child, obviously I had not uncommonly a lot of expectations and pressures put on me, and so my actual educational background is I have a history degree and I have a law degree from New York Law School. But writing has always been a passion. I've always wanted to tell stories. And I've written in the past, I've written fiction, and there's always been a character in my books that would be either an immigrant or a child of immigrants, but it's never really been the main thing about them. However, when I started writing this, I think I rediscovered my voice, writing this fictionalized memoir about that first year. And I'm very, very proud to put it out there. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about it.
Awesome, awesome. I'm looking forward to learning more. And I'm happy to hear that you came across our podcast and reached out and wanted to share your story. So we're happy to present our platform. Hold space is basically what I told a few people. I'm holding the space for us because I have found that at times I've felt, I can only speak for myself, like when I have certain just heart to heart conversations and I say, this is how I'm experiencing a certain group.
Mm-hmm.
Help me understand. Like, you're a part of this group. Like, where am I going wrong? Sometimes you can feel like people are gaslighting you. Like, I don't know anyone who would behave
Yeah.
this way. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and I've had people text me to say, thanks, Simone, for speaking up for us, because that's been my experience. As a daughter of immigrants, this is how it was like for me in school. This is how I was treated. And so I'm holding the space, right, for us to be able to tell our stories and to be authentic in it, and not to feel like we need to sugarcoat it to please somebody else, just to tell the truth.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing here. So you've shared a bit about your heritage and your background. And I wonder then, is there an arrival story behind what brought you and your family to the US?
Yeah, we're Jewish Soviet refugees. So in the former Soviet Union, um, we were not considered Russian or Belarusian or Ukrainian. We were Jews. in birth certificates and teachers' rosters and passports. You would be going down a list, and they would be Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian, Marina Raydun, Jew. So that's who we were. So we were never a part of the whole. We were basically second class citizens. So while religion itself was outlawed in Soviet Union, we were still Jews, even though the religious part of it was robbed generations ago. We Everyone made sure you knew who you were.
Right.
You didn't need to practice religion for everybody to know who you were. And the United States has been fighting for a long time to help Jews from Soviet Union be allowed to come out because Soviet Union would not let anybody leave. So there have been trickles in the 70s, in the 80s, and in the 90s. So we came in the early 90s wave as refugees from the former Soviet Union. Um, and we're very, very grateful to this day. We that it, it's been a dream um, of my parent, particularly of my father's. His family has been coming over in trickles, like whenever Soviet Union would open a window, like another family would leave, and then another family would leave, and finally, with reunification, family reunification, we were able to come here as refugees.
Okay, wow. As someone who is outside, who was raised Christian, practicing Christian, and I still try to understand where, and I guess maybe this is where you just said you guys were second class citizen. Like, how is it that the religious angle becomes your, is it basically your nationality? But it's quite confusing
Yeah.
for somebody on the outside because I'm like, so how could somebody be called, can somebody be a Jew and Ukrainian and get the Ukrainian nationality? And the religious part of it becomes another part of their identity. But you never got, I don't understand. How do they differentiate?
So that's the fascinating part because all religion across the board was outlawed in the Soviet Union. So even if, like today, predominantly, like Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, it's Christian, but it's for the most part, it's Russian Orthodox or Ukrainian Orthodox Church. But even people who were Christian, they couldn't really go to church. So all religion was basically prohibited. But Jews, we were a nationality. That's what it was called. So other ethnic groups would have, like, Uzbeki, Moldovan, and we would be Jews no matter what republic we lived in. And they were 15 in the Soviet Union. We were always Jews. And that would always count against you, whether it's in college applications or job promotions, which was the case for my father, or school experiences, which is how it was for me. Because the fascinating part is, as soon as Soviet Union opened the doors and let Jews leave, a lot left. And we were not in the early part of the wave, we were on the latter part. And by the time we were about to leave, I was the only Jew in school, literally, in a town that had a pretty decent Jewish population when we moved there. By that time, I was the only Jew, and Jews were the only ones who were kind of able to leave at that point while the country was crumbling. So there was a lot on top of the systemic discrimination that was just built into the system of Soviet Union. There was also a lot of this resentment, and even potentially jealousy that, well, at least you get to leave and I don't. So it's very trippy because, yeah, it has nothing to do with religion. It just has to do with our DNA and our parents. That's all. It's to do with actual Judaism as a religion.
Wow. Because I hear that quite a bit. Like people, it seems to like it's like a tag that follows you guys wherever you go. Like any
Yeah.
country you're in, I'm like, why aren't they like the national of that country? They're
Yeah.
it's like Jews, like the first thing. How are they able to track you guys like this? Is it physical features? Is it blood? Are they literally doing DNA tests, blood tests? How is it that you cannot just be absorbed into? Because it sounds like you guys were not practicing Judaism
Oh
because it
no,
was
you
outlawed.
couldn't
So
even
how
if
did
you
they
wanted.
know that your family specifically, you know?
So it just basically went on documents. So your birth certificates, when a child would be born, they would be registered. You would take the parents' documents. So it would be father Jew, mother Jew, and the same thing going up the family tree. You would just track the documents.
Wow. So you couldn't have a Jew that married someone else, like another ethnic group, and then what would the child then be called? Is like, I
It
mean, like,
it's actually the opposite of the Jewish law. By the
yes,
Jewish law, it would go by the mother's side, but I
yes.
believe in Soviet Union it would be by the father's side. So if the father was Russian, Belarusian, etc., I think you'd be able to register your child as that.
Okay, right. So it
It
just
helps with the
was kept,
last name as well because, so like my last name was fairly ambiguous, but it's pretty rare. So that made me stand out on that angle. But a lot of people have more ethnic sounding last names. So, yes, if you would marry, if a Jewish woman would marry someone who's not Jewish, they would definitely take that last name just to like try to shed that and fit in easier.
right. Okay. No, and I can imagine. My goodness. Because I'm like, wow, that's quite a meticulous system to maintain.
And you're right, like the disconnect between, but these people aren't even like practicing any religion, but they're still Jews.
Right. No, I often wondered in my own thinking, trying to make sense of when I hear somebody constantly, it's just you're a Jew, you're a Jew. And I'm like, but because I lived in Mexico for 2 years, there's a lot of Jews living in Mexico
Hmm.
City.
Oh
And
wow.
that's all I would hear. It was just like, Jewish, 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 but they're Mexican because after a
They're
few
Mexican,
generations,
yeah.
they're born in Mexico. So I'm like,
Yeah.
but that thing just kept following them. I'm like, I don't
Mm.
understand. Like, why is the religion or the religious aspect of it like just trumps everything else and it just follows you wherever you go? It just
Yeah, you can't, even if you convert, you still, like, even if you convert outside of Judaism and you want to adapt a different religion, you will still be a Jew. You cannot shake that.
that's another story for another day, right?
I
I
know
can imagine.
it's
Yeah, I would
it,
have to
it
do a
goes
lot of
very deep in
research.
history.
Yes, right. I see
And this
that.
is something I go into in my book when I was in first grade. And again, I was the only Jew, not just in my class, but pretty much in the entire building by that point. This was 1989. And I borrowed a quarter for ice cream from my first grade teacher's daughter, who I believe was in second or third grade. And I forgot to return it the next day. And the next thing I remember is I was on the floor and she was kicking me in the stomach for being a dirty kike. Um,
A dirty.
Kike.
Oh, that's the derogatory
That's
term
the
that they use.
slur,
No,
yeah.
I'm serious. When I say I'm new to
Yeah,
some of these things, I am. Is it
yeah,
Kike or something?
yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh, really? So is that what they say in New York? Is that to New York or is it
Yeah,
throughout the
well,
US?
in English you don't hear it as much. In Russian, the equivalent, which is an interesting linguistic lesson, in Russian, what they would say is Žid or Židovka, depending on whether it's male or female. And the interesting thing is that in Polish, those words just mean Jew. It's not derogatory in any way. But the way it was adapted into Russian, it became derogatory. So that was my teacher's daughter, for forgetting to return a
A
quarter.
quarter.
As a 7-year old, I was beaten up by 8 or 9-year old for being a dirty kike.
Oh my goodness. And you
And how
remember
do you tell your
that?
teacher with that, right? Like, it's her daughter. Um, so yeah, that's like hard to shake.
My goodness. Oh wow. 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 I'm hearing a lot of stories too. A few Haitians who went to school in New York and how brutal it was for them not being able to speak English. They were like abused, brutalized, really, like beaten up and not being able to express or explain what happened, going home with faces bloody and yeah, just
I have
I'm
to say
just
the interesting disconnect for me coming over here, from a land where I was Jew, 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 I came here and I became Russian. And it's so weird. And for the first few years, I would actually try to explain and be like, I speak Russian, but I'm not Russian. And they're like, what do you mean? I'd be like, I'm Jewish. And they're like, are you from Israel? And I'm like, no. And it was a very interesting thing to experience that coming over here, finally, I was allowed to wear my Star of David because I was not allowed to do that back there for safety reasons. And finally, here I am with my Star of David, and they calling me Russian, and it's like that is so weird.
yes. No, because we're not used to it doesn't make sense for me coming from another part of the world, which is why I've always tried to make sense. I'm like, why is just always Jew, Jew, Jewish, Jewish? But I don't hear the nationality because you have a
Yeah,
lot of Jews over across the world and they'll tell you I was born and raised or a few
yeah,
generations here. And but it's still yes, that's
yeah.
another conversation.
I only became Russian in America.
Wow, wow, wow. So I'm curious to know what is it like back then? Do you remember in Belarus, like what was foods that you ate? It sounds like you guys were marginalized basically as a group, but what was it like for you? Do you remember those days growing up?
Yeah. So basically, so I was born in '82, but by the time I entered school, which it was '89, the Soviet Union started to crumble. And by 91, it split into 15 brand new countries. And you had brand new money that meant nothing. Like prices would be like in millions because the inflation would be so crazy. And things started becoming scarce. They always were, but I wasn't as aware of it as a little kid. So I only started, developing real memories around that age. And it was all whatever you can get. Like when we came to America, my dad still walked around. He was ahead of his time. He had a reusable tote, which at the time back in Soviet Union, you would walk around with it all the time because who knows what you're going to stumble on. All of a sudden,
Mm,
there can be a truck that has a truck of something, and you join the line and you buy it because you're not going to have that opportunity again. So he would continue walking with his tote, and people would laugh at him here, saying, well, they give you bags for whatever. You don't need to do that. And now I'm laughing. My dad passed a few years ago. Like, he didn't know he was ahead of his time. Totes made a return.
oh, definitely, because I think in the DC area when I was living there, they started charging an extra, I think 5 cent tax or something, and now you're welcome to bring your bags, your little totes to the
Yeah.
grocery store to help with the recycling and so forth. And I think Atlanta did that too, I want to
Yeah,
say.
yeah. Now you can't even get plastic bags. But in '94, it was like also like a mental shift for him because you like if my dad would be late coming home from work back in Belarus, and my mom would ask like, "Where were you?" He would bring whatever he bought, and he's like, "Well, they were selling it, so here we go," because we're not gonna have the opportunity. I remember a lot of just the way the country was structured, a lot of what you got was favors. So if you knew somebody who worked in a certain factory and you did them a favor, they could help you get something. So my dad was very handy and he would fix TVs after work or things like that. And we had three giant bags in the bedroom. One was rice, one was flour, and I think the other one was buckwheat. I can't remember what the third one was. But it was a bag probably about my height and it would last us years. But that's what you got because it wasn't in stores. You couldn't just go and get rice in the store. If you stumbled upon it, great, but it wasn't a reliable thing when you go to ShopRite and you shop for whatever you need. But here we had these ready bags because my dad did a favor for someone. And that's kind
Goodness.
of how you lived. You swam where you could.
And that's probably how he got paid, right? Kind of like a barter system.
A
He
lot
would
of it, yeah. A lot of it would be like um, uh, like even medications, and like in early 90s, a lot of medicines would be unavailable. So you'd go to the hospital and doctor would give you a list of saying this is what you would need for this procedure, find it somewhere. And you would go and you try, okay, well, I have this. What can I trade for this? It's like, I think there was a fairy tale like that, right? When like somebody kept trading and trading. That was
Yes.
basically life.
My goodness. Wow. So were you guys allowed to go out and play? You're being taught Russian in school. I mean,
Yes.
like,
So
what was it like as a young child? I mean, were you free to play about, have friends, or were you kind of isolated being, quote unquote Jew in
yeah.
Russia at the time?
So in school, yes, Russian, at the time, all republics or former republics had Russian as the predominant language. And whatever the republic you lived in, like if you lived in Ukraine, you would also learn Ukrainian. If you lived in Belarus, you would also learn Belarusian, but that was a secondary thing.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, I didn't have many friends, for obvious reasons. And my parents also didn't feel safe letting me play outside. The way it was structured, like most of the buildings, they would form like a blocked in like rectangle of cement because they were all cement blocks, and you'd have large courtyards with playground equipment, and kids would come out and they would play there all day. And my parents never felt safe letting me out there, so I spent a lot of my time on our balcony reading, or my favorite pastime would be playing concert. um, but yeah, also toward the end of our tenure there, there became kind of, it's a big word calling it a Hebrew school, but it was kind of like a Jewish club kind of thing that was kind of underground in this old decrepit house, and they gave English lessons. They gave Hebrew and English lessons for families who were planning to immigrate. So like on Sundays I would go there, and like I had some friendships there.
Right, right. Okay. Wow. As I hear you say that, I think of raising my daughter. And remembering when I was younger, growing up in Jamaica, and just, all the kids, our community was pretty small in the rural area, in the countryside, right? The kids would come to our land. We had a big plot of land in front of our home, and everybody would just come, and we all will play. And I mean, you were just kids. I don't have any of these memories, but I tell you, my husband and I have kept our daughter inside,
Mm-hmm.
sadly, because we're trying, in a way, I feel like I'm trying to protect her because some of the neighborhood kids are not the nicest, and they only kind of stick to each other. They only play with each other. And she often sits here and she looks out at them playing, and you can tell she just wants to go out and play. But
Mm-hmm.
after a year, in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, and she's now 5, I think she's probably wondering, like, why is mommy keeping me inside? Or she will just stand outside and just watch the kids playing. But yeah, and we're living in the US, okay?
Yeah.
And this is not how I was raised. This is not how my husband was raised. But yet, in pockets of the US, you have parents who are making these types of decision because
Yeah.
certain ethnic groups within the US are not going to be as friendly to your children.
Yeah. That's right.
So, and that's what you're expressing that was taking place in
Yeah.
Russia, in this, supposedly open society and land of freedom. But
Yeah.
we have so many different blendings and perspectives of people here. So you just have to just be aware.
Yeah. Do your best. You have to trust your judgment.
And I'm just hoping and praying that we're making the right decision, just from past and previous experiences on the playground and experiencing this group. I just know they're not friendly to people who look like me. So
Yeah. So why would you want to expose her to that?
exactly. And so I'm protecting her. So I'm just
Yeah.
hoping, I don't know what it's doing to her psyche and what she's thinking and how she's processing it. But at some point, I guess I will ask and have that conversation with her. So, but that just kind of triggered something as I heard
Mm.
you express that. I was like, wow. So what was, as we talked about your book earlier, was it like, during that first year and adjusting, and share with us about your book?
It was it was very trippy. I had these big dreams of American dream and America and skyscrapers and all these fabulous things. And in the first chapter, I go into this when we were picked up at the airport by our old neighbors. They kept saying that my grandma lives in a studio. And to me, the only context I had for the word studio was, an artist's loft, canvases, high ceilings, big windows. So I'm like, whoa, grandma's really made it. She came over 3 years ahead of us. And then we come to, a very regular Brooklyn building, and apparently studio is like a one-room apartment. So it was like a little rude awakening from the beginning. And from a child's perspective, it's looking back is pretty funny. Um, I really wanted to be American because I never fit in where I came from. And I just, I had this dream of this diversity where people look different and we all gonna be friends and we all gonna hold hands and sing kumbaya and everything's gonna be awesome. And then I started school and crap was really hard. I
Yes.
didn't know any language. I mean, I took
Mm.
1 year of English back in Belarus, but I literally like came over knowing how to count and like just saying basic expressions. So I knew nothing. They had English as a second language classes for us, but even the Russian speaking kids, they don't want to deal with you because you're fresh off the boat and they already rid themselves of some of the stigma and they don't want to pick up any of yours.
Mm.
So you very, very lonely. And everyone keeps telling you, you're a kid, you don't need to worry about it. Give yourself a couple of months, you'll be fluent, you'll be fine. And weeks and months are passing and you're not fine. And um, my family also was undergoing some growing pains because my sister stayed back, which was a huge rift in the family, obviously. For my mom specifically, it was very difficult to focus on anything in the new life and adaptation. Her mind and her heart were back with her
Wow.
firstborn. So there was that aspect to it. And, I was always a good student. And then I come here and I don't know what I'm doing. I can't, even math is a little different, like the decimal point back, the Russian math, you would use a comma, not a period. Like little things like that, where you would think math is universal, that should be my easiest, but it wasn't. It was a lot of crying. It was a lot of overwhelm, but also a lot of bonding for me and my father because every night after he would come home from work, he would sit down with me and we would take dictionaries and we would translate my homework word for word. And we would stay up for hours. I don't know how much that man slept that year. It was a lot. And for the longest time, I would joke that if I could go back in time, I would just surgically remove that year from my life. And when
Mm.
I started writing this book, and I started, now I have perspective, I have, time to look back, to reflect. I'm a parent, and it illuminated so much for me. Like it answered so many questions as to how I parent, why certain things trigger me, because I was able to reflect on that from this distance. And that's why I called it Year One, because that is my origin story. Like that's my formative year, and that made me who I am today. It taught me a lot about myself, about people, about strangers and friends, about my parents.
Mm.
It was a very interesting experience going through this. I was sitting on this for a while. I would start and drop this because I was afraid. It's revealing. It feels like a little bit like undressing. So I made it fictionalized. So I would
Mm.
change names, identifying factors about people who are living, small things, but all the events, all the things are real. So it's really been a blast, and I'm so excited to share it because I think it can help. Even immigrants for sure will find it relatable of any background. But also, I think even though it's really written for adults, I think young adults and teenagers can read it too. Just because it's that age when there's so much going on inside you, the hormones, the middle school environment. I'm in an inner city school that is overcrowded. There's so much sensory overload and so much overstimulation, and all this language, it just goes over you. You're just swimming. Like these
Hmm.
words blend into one long word. You don't know where it starts or where it ends. So I think it would be helpful, even like for teens or maybe first generation kids too. I think it would help with perspective on things.
Right. Do you have it there with you? You want to hold it up so we can
Uh,
get a copy of it? We haven't, I haven't seen it as yet.
yeah,
Um,
this was my proof copy, so it has the not for sale tag on it. Uh,
okay.
but this is
All
actually
right.
this was my first picture taken in America. This is maybe a week or two in. And the artist who worked on the cover, Anna Abramson, who's just an incredible artist, um, she took that and she
It's
overimposed
beautiful.
my
It's a
face
lovely
on it.
cover. And to
Yeah,
think that's actually you, right?
yeah, yeah. That was
Wow.
11-year-old me, very bright-eyed, very excited to be here. And I just I make fun of myself looking back. Like I was so in my head. I had all these like fantasies, like my dad's gonna get a fantastic job right away, and we're gonna live in a skyscraper. And no, you're gonna work really hard before you even see that. I spent a lot of time with music. Michael Jackson was a huge part of my first year in America. I honestly like don't think my mental health would be the same without my Dangerous tape. I played it over and over and over again. And I watched a lot of Family Matters. That was my favorite
Oh, I love Family
TV.
Matters. Yes.
I even have,
Urkel with Urkel, right?
yeah, and I have his autograph. I actually sent in as a seventh grader when I finally learned to write cohesive sentences. I wrote in, you remember like they had these books with like addresses where you would like send, like I guess to agents or managers.
Mm-hmm.
And someone brought it to school and we all passed it around. And I'm like, I need to write to Steve Urkel. And he
Oh my God.
sent back a postcard. I still have it. And, it sounds silly, but truly, those people, without ever meeting me, kind of helped me survive because they gave me something to look forward to. My Michael Jackson tape was my prize thing that when I would sit there for 6 hours in school, not knowing what's happening or how I'm going to do this homework assignment because I don't even know what it means, I could look forward to just turning it on when I get home and just listening. And that's all I had to worry about. So as silly as it may be, my fantasies and my escape from reality, they helped.
Right. Yeah, that's the word that came to mind. That was your escape, your peaceful escape, right? My goodness. So then, first year, and as you got older, how did you get to like wanting to be a lawyer? How did that develop? What was your parents' experience?
Well, it was kind of decided for me very early on that I was going to be a lawyer. Um, as a child of immigrants, so well, technically, I'm an immigrant myself. Like, so I guess I'm
First
technically still a
generation,
lawyer.
yes.
The expectations and the pressure are high because, like it or not, even though we came from a very bad situation, we still had something established, and we dropped everything so you could have a better life. So whether it was unspoken pressure or spoken pressure, sometimes it was always there. And since I was always good in school, a lawyer somehow became the thing everybody decided I was going to be. And I did. I became a lawyer. I went to college. I initially thought I wanted to be a history teacher, and everybody kept trying to dissuade me from that because you're an immigrant child, you gotta get a degree with a doctorate in it.
Right. It's either lawyer, doctor, or engineer.
Yeah, that's it. Those are your options. And I wasn't that good at science, so um, so I was kind of dissuaded from that, and so I got a degree in history, and which I loved. particularly I love immigration history for obvious reasons. And then I went to law school. I It wasn't my favorite, but I still managed to do well and pass the bar. But I don't currently practice. Um, and yeah, I've always been gravitating to creative writing, to that kind of realm. And I'm here I am talking to you about it.
Wow, wow.
For my parents, the journey uh, was different. For my mom, unfortunately, it was probably the hardest because of the rift in our family. She was so depressed that first year because you have to remember this was 1994. You couldn't Skype, you couldn't Zoom, you had to keep changing telephone companies who would give you a slightly cheaper rate to call abroad. Our
Yes.
bills were piling up. My father was the breadwinner, and as below minimum wage that it was, but still, and we couldn't afford those bills, and it was very hard. My mom couldn't focus on learning the language or things like that, so it kind of stunted her, unfortunately. She wound up working within the Russian speaking community, so that helped. She never really needed the language. Uh, for my father, he had a few menial jobs when he got here. He picked up whatever gigs he could. And then eventually, in '95, a year and a couple of months after we came here, he got a job at an aerospace factory, and that's the job he held until he died. And he wound up being the supervisor of the assembly department there. So he really blossomed. Like he had that like true, American immigrant spirit. Like he truly accepted it and embraced it. He worked hard and he he got the rewards. He spoke the language. He had respect. Um, he, I always say like this country was made for him. I wish we came earlier. Like my parents were 45 when we came,
Okay.
which is not old, but had he come earlier, I think he would have accomplished more. But he loved this country. He couldn't wait to get out of the former Soviet Union. Um, Israel, my parents, specifically my father, did not want to go to because he didn't want us serving in the army, or living in a country that's constantly under threat. So America was always the goal. My mom has some family in Israel, so my mom was more lenient, but for my dad was like, nope, it's America or bust.
Right. And so I'm curious, and I know our listeners would be too. Why did your sister stay back? And how
Oh, she
old
got
was
married.
she? Oh, she
Um,
got married.
so the way it works, so you file all your documents with the American government, and then they call you for an interview to see if you qualify for the refugee status. So there's two parts. There's the reunification of family, and then even if you can prove that, you could go as a parolee, but then somebody has to vouch for you, and we did not
Yes.
have people well off to do that, or demonstrate that you were oppressed, which was super easy for us because we were. So you passed that interview, and we passed it as a family, and we got the refugee status. And then within a couple of months, my sister got married, and her husband wasn't ready to leave.
Oh,
So he didn't want to leave, and she didn't want to leave. So my father turned right back around to Moscow, to the consulate, to the embassy rather, with this situation, which was the first time we realized there's such a holiday as Thanksgiving, because he came there on a Thursday and the Marines out front said, we're closed, it's Thanksgiving. And he's like, what's Thanksgiving? And so he waited till Monday, and they told him she has 3 years to keep that status. If she doesn't use it within 3 years, that's it, it lapses. So she followed us 2 years after. So she is here now. So we came in '94. She came in '96, right before I entered high school. She was 21. We're 10 years apart, and it was young love, and it's I can't without my husband. So, we were all young and stupid. And that was hard. I mean, nowadays it would probably be easier with all the, modern means of communication. But at the time, it was either letters that took months or these like 10-minute phone calls that would cost an arm and a leg. And my mom wanted to call once a week, which now as a parent I totally get. But it was also really expensive and something we couldn't afford. So it was rough. It was very rough.
Right. Okay. And are you both the only children?
Yeah, it was
Just
just
the
the
two
two
of
of
you.
us.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I'm happy she came over after two
me
years
too.
and your mom could like rest and breathe a bit, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, did she marry a Jewish man? Was he non-Jew? How was her experience after you all left? She's a young lady. Like, what was that
Yeah,
like?
he was also Jewish, and he was a businessman. Now, a lot of people after the fall, or right at the fall of Soviet Union, a lot of people went into business. That was the new cool word, business. And he was one of the few successful ones. Unfortunately, what came with success is also the growing mafia and the government that would also blackmail you for money.
Mhm.
So things were getting harder and harder over those 2 years that they stayed. Things were they were getting dangerous. So at the time her husband left, they literally he and his parents they left under the cover of night. Literally, they didn't tell anybody, no neighbors, no friends. They didn't tell them what date they're leaving. They literally got in the car and drove to the airport. But in '94, he didn't see it as a dire need because he, as opposed to my family, was successful. But it eventually wound up biting everybody in the behind.
Yes, yes.
Eventually, they came.
Right. Yes. That's reminding me. I have some exposure to being traveling to Cuba during the Castro years. And
Oh.
well, he was getting older, and I think his brother was in power at the time. But I would hear people say that the when we would go to the markets and the grocery stores, you would have like a whole shelf of oil or a whole shelf of one thing, but the store was never stocked. There were empty shelves everywhere.
Mhm.
And then the other thing was we go to the market and we would hear people say that it's like the leftovers, like the better
Mhm.
products were either gone to the tourist industry or the government would have it. They would get it.
Yeah.
Or when the restaurants, the little holes in the wall that people would operate as restaurants, that they had to give the government a certain percentage of what they're earning. And
Yeah.
so that's why, things are
Yeah.
just kind of
But they
bleak
would
for
just
them.
drum up charges for you too. Like that's super easy until you pay up. And in terms of food, yeah, we were even when things started becoming a little more available, they were not affordable. So I've never had a banana until I came here. I've never had pizza until I came here. Once my mom bought me a kiwi and we had no idea what to do with it. We were like, do we peel it? Do we grate it? Like, what do you do with this hairy little thing?
Yes.
And when we came here, we really did eat like horses. Um, because the accessibility and it was affordable back then. Like things definitely got expensive over the years, even relative to to inflation. I think
Yes.
things just did become more expensive because at the time I remember we could shop for a family of four because my grandmother was also with us. For $20 we could have a decent shopping for a week, and now that's unfathomable. In
Yes.
school, I got for the first year, I got free lunch, and I loved my free lunches. Chocolate milk, like oh my god! And you might appreciate this story. For years, I was looking for knish because I remember liking knishes in the lunchroom, and I
Hmm.
could just taste it. You know how like you can remember tastes, and I would chase this imaginary knish, and I couldn't find it. I couldn't tap into it. And then my brother-in-law brought Jamaican patties for dinner. And I bite into it and I'm like, oh my God, that's it. That was not a knish. That was a
Was it
patty.
too big?
And I just remembered it wrong. But when I bite into a patty, like the beef, Jamaican beef patty, boom, I'm right back in the cafeteria. That was like my happiest 20 minutes of my day would be in that cafeteria
Oh,
because I would
wow.
eat like my pizza with chocolate milk or my patty or my cheeseburger. But then I would come home, and the only thing my mom did besides cry that year was cook. She cooked all the time. So I would come home from school and I would be expected to eat again, and then I would eat again for dinner. I don't know how it didn't rip at the seams, because we could not believe our luck. Like, you go to the store and there are like 10 different juices. Like, you never had one in a store. Like, what? Like, bread is pre-sliced. Like, first of all, there is
Wow.
bread. Anytime you go, there is bread. You don't need to stand in line and wait for the truck to bring it over. So that was such a highlight of that first year. Like, to this day,
Yes.
I like my white bread with like a thick layer of cream cheese because it like brings me right back.
Oh my goodness, my goodness. I know exactly what you mean, like being introduced to the fruits here that I know nothing about. Like the different apples would be new for the longest time. Some of them I had to get used to. I didn't quite like the taste or and so forth. Join us again next time for part 2 of this episode. Friends, as always, please subscribe, comment, and share if you enjoyed this interview. If you're passionate about telling immigrant stories, our team is looking for help. If you're willing to help with podcast production, social media, or Patreon management, please reach out to us. You can also donate on our Patreon if it's easier for you. All the links are in the description below. Thank you. We thank our listeners around the world, and we appreciate your continued support as we build our human library. Please remember to give us a 5-star review, subscribe, and share with your friends, family, and circle of influence.